Good morning, and welcome to worship at Unity Church-Unitarian. And a big hello to those of you joining us online. I want to say hi to you. We're glad you're with us this morning. Welcome to this time set aside each week as we open ourselves to transformation so that we might experience wonder, open-hearted engagement, and courageous action. I am Reverend Justin Schroeder, your guest preacher this morning, and it is really good to be back among you all this morning. I look out and I just see so many familiar faces and people I know I'll meet while I'm here this morning, and it's just a real joy in my heart to be with you. I'm here with my wife, Juliana Keene, who will be at a table in the social hall after the service. If you'd like to say hello to her and then learn more about Holding Space for Change, our newly launched practice of accompanying people through change and transition. I share this morning's worship service with worship associate Jim Mulvey. And Jim, it has been a real joy to work with you and get to know you a little bit to prepare for this service. If this is your first time attending a service here, you are invited to complete a visitor card in the pews or online, if you're with us online, so that the church can provide you with some information about congregational life and ways you might be involved here. After the service today, Jim and I look forward to greeting those of you who are here in the hallway outside the sanctuary and invite you into the parish hall for refreshments and fellowship. Those joining us online are invited to a Zoom coffee hour. Welcome once again.
December of 2020 was a dark time for Nancy, my wife, and for me. For the first time in 40 years, our home would not be filled with family and friends to celebrate both Hanukkah and Christmas. We would celebrate both holidays alone, our children and grandchildren 1,000 miles away. On the last night of Hanukkah, Nancy recited the Hanukkah blessing and lit the candles. We sat in the dark, holding each other's hand, illuminated by the glowing Hanukkah candles. The quiet glow of the candles was comforting, almost mystical. The candles eventually burned out, but the memory of that night remained with me throughout the years of pandemic. I've been hard-pressed to say what was so calming in the midst of so much uncertainty and longing. During last Sunday's service, we heard this line from a poem by Adolfo Quezada. "You are not the force that saves me from the pain of life. You are the force that brings me life, even in the midst of pain." That was it. I recognized it. It was the life force of Hanukkah lights pushing back the darkness and the life force of being with a loved one. Now we are gathered in what some say is post-pandemic time. Many of us may still be seeking an understanding of what we all went through. By the light of Hanukkah candles or by the chalice flame we are about to light, we seek to behold and embrace the force of life in community. May the light we now kindle inspire us to use our powers to heal and not to harm, to help and not to hinder, to bless and not to curse, to serve each other as we emerge from our shared COVID experiences.
Mantle, and we were all on Zoom at home, meeting once a week and trying to make things work. And a song that sort of became the soundtrack for a lot of that is the opening hymn, Resilience by Abby Bettinas. That is a song that the women's ensemble especially sang every time we met, as well as the Unity Choir. We did like a virtual choir of it. So I invite you to sing that together today. And if you're in a choir and know the harmony part or the discant, by all means, feel free to do it. We'll just say it together a few times. So everyone stand up with me as you are willing and able, and step on the ground. Just stomp your foot, and I'm going to sing it, and you can join me as you pick it up. It goes like this. Resilience. We are strong, shoulder to shoulder, keep moving on. Resilience. Make a new plan, stand up again and say, yes, we again. Resilience. We are strong, shoulder to shoulder, keep moving on. Resilience. make a new plan, stand up again and say, yes, we can. Resist. Stand up again and say, yes, we. One more time. Resilience. We are strong. Shoulder to shoulder, keep moving on. Resilience. Make a new plan. Stand up again and say, yes. And here it ends. Resilience. Thank you, everyone.
I love singing with you all. Each time this community gathers for worship, we set aside a moment to expand the caring ministry of this congregation. Together, we recognize the cycle of life and death, the circle of love, compassion, and witness that is at the center of this and every faith community. We join with parents and teachers and all those whose primary spiritual practice is caring for children, with those who live with grief or chronic pain, with illnesses seen and unseen, with mental disability or addiction. We pray for our neighbors in prison, those who care for family members in ill health, those who are struggling to stay afloat in the midst of poverty. Our lives are blessed by those who knowingly and with curiosity and courage face their final days. We pray for those in harm's way, for the wisdom and strength of the leaders of the world, and for the people of this courageous congregation as together you live into your longing to embody and help build the beloved community. And will you pray with me for those we now name? We send warm congratulations to Ellen Wold and Larry Oberg, who are celebrating their 30th anniversary. The sanctuary flowers are from their garden. And today we hold in love and prayer the family of Rob Eller Isaacs on the first anniversary of his death. Rob died on this day in 2022. The impact of his presence and the blessings of his co-ministry with his wife and colleague, the Reverend Jan Eller Isaacs, remain as a living legacy at the heart of Unity Church. And I invite you now to speak aloud or hold in the silent sanctuary of your hearts the names of those you would like to lift up today in this embracing meditation. Will you pray with me? Life force, spirit of love, mystery that is present in every person, in everything, and in every moment. Thank you for this time to remember, this time to be still, this time for music and song to touch the deepest places of our heart. This time where we do not need to be efficient or effective or prepared, we simply need to be here with you, with one another. In this quiet space, Holy One, may we acknowledge all that has changed in the past 3.5 years and all that is still changing in us and around us. May we remember that through it all, through the grief, the fear, the anxiety, the not knowing, and the moments of blessing and grace, may we remember our breath has been a faithful companion. And so when we lose our balance, when we feel dysregulated, when we don't know the way forward, may we return to our breath, open to its teachings, its steadying presence, and the ways it might help us stay connected to you, source of all that is. May it be so, and amen.
Today's reading is from the February New York Times article. As we enter a fourth pandemic year, each of us is consciously or subconsciously working through potentially irreconcilable stories about what we lived through, or else strenuously avoiding that dissidence, insisting there's no work to be done. And so, with many people claiming, publicly at least, that they are over the pandemic, that they have, so to speak, straightened their picture frames and dragged their psychic trash to the curb, this article is saying, hey, hold up, what's in that bag?
And what a question that is. What's in that bag full of memories and experiences that I imagine many of us have taken to the curb? What is in that bag of psychic trash, if you will? The contents are different for all of us. Of course they are. There was no one uniform experience of the pandemic. But after reading this article several times, this article from the New York Times Magazine back in February, I believe that very few of us, including myself, have actually fully processed and metabolized what happened to us during the pandemic and how that is shaping us now in ways large and small. So perhaps we all have little bags of trash we've placed by the curb. And if that is true, if you'll entertain that as a possibility in your life and my life and our shared collective lives, if that is true, it means that we are living with unnamed impacts, with unnamed changes, unnamed losses and traumas, and also some unnamed gifts and blessings, strange as that may sound, as a result of the pandemic. And it is hard work to do that naming. According to this article in the New York Times, and I quote, people's inclination to process what was happening to them seemed to weaken and narrow as time went by. The pandemic exhausted people. It thwarted their powers of concentration. It was traumatic, probably, but also too big or too boring to do much with. End of quote. Even now, thinking about this sermon and preparing for this sermon, I was surprised at how hard it was to pull up memories and stories and experiences from the pandemic. Sure, there were some pieces there, but only after sitting with it and journaling a number of mornings did the fuller story for me start to emerge. It took time and energy for those to surface. Memories like the story of chaplain colleagues that I knew in full precaution gear, taking iPads into hospital rooms of the dying so that loved ones could say goodbye over Zoom. Like massive temporary morgues being set up around the country, including in the Twin Cities. Like the stories of those who lived alone and didn't experience any physical touch for a year. And the stories of those who had no space at all, way too much touch, if you will, from their kids and their partners and their housemates, and were just at wit's end. Like the stories of people adopting 1, 2, even 3 or more pandemic pets, cats and dogs, and now some of these people, as I talk to them, are wondering, couldn't they have picked a different pandemic animal? Like a goldfish or something a little easier than a couple of dogs. Like the stories of people who sewed hundreds and hundreds of masks, personalized and beautiful, made by hand to give to neighbors and friends and folks who couldn't get a mask. And the story of the lockdown itself drastically decreasing air pollution and greenhouse gas emissions within just a few weeks. And this strange glimpse I had, maybe you had it, of like, oh, we could address this challenge if we really had the will to do it, this climate crisis we're in. We're carrying all of these stories, these memories, these experiences, and thousands more from the past 3.5 years that I don't think we've quite digested or made sense of. Outwardly, the global health pandemic has been declared over. The pandemic is over and everything is back to normal. But so many of us continue to live with long COVID. Others with compromised immune systems, and they have to exercise rigorous caution with who they see and what that looks like. But most of us have gained many of those freedoms back that we lost during the pandemic. And I think beneath all of it, there's something in our bodies that can feel some of this dissonance. We know, maybe in our bodies, that something is a little bit amiss. Everything is not normal again. Our nervous systems are still in some ways activated. We're still grieving. We're still unsettled. And the impact of the pandemic is very much alive in us and in our institutions and our workplaces. So I think we do have to go through that metaphorical trash bag, empty it out, and see what else is there, to mine the trash, to make sense of what happened, and to learn from those experiences. So let's do a little bit of that together this morning. Let's time travel through the past 3.5 years, through the lockdowns and the closed businesses and the empty shelves and the virtual learning, which was great for some families and a complete and total train wreck for other families. to virtual church, to quarantines, to no COVID tests, to COVID nightmares, to social distancing and pods, to washing and disinfecting groceries. I did that. We did that in our family. I'm sure we weren't alone. To the mental health challenges and the grief of that time. So much grief. Anticipatory grief, ambiguous grief, hidden grief, grief that was unacknowledged or maybe unvalidated by social norms. And maybe that's the place in this unpacking of this trash bag to start, this place of grief. Because so much of the backdrop of the pandemic was grief and loss. Tremendous grief in this country, as over 1 million people lost their lives to COVID. And I just sat with that number. I know you've sat with this as well. But really to sit with that number and to realize that is Target Field filled and emptied 40 times, filled to capacity and emptied 40 times of people. 1 million people is more Americans than died in both of the World War I, World War II, the Korean War, the Vietnam War, and the Iraq War. So grief. We grieved, and we did Zoom funerals, and we postponed funerals, and we did small gatherings outside to mourn those losses, brothers and parents, grandparents, friends. And there were other losses that kept piling on, long-time relationships that ended over arguments about vaccines and masks and stay-at-home orders, families and relationships that were stressed and strained because of those conversations. There's the loss because of long COVID, of missed birthdays for aging parents, missed holiday gatherings, canceled and postponed weddings, graduation ceremonies, and family trips. And sometimes these decisions to cancel or postpone were easy. They were clear and clean, but often pandemic-related decisions were complicated. They were nuanced, and no matter the decision you made, grief was present. I'm thinking of my own experience at the end of July last year. I had plans to visit Rob and Jan, the former ministers of this congregation, to see them in Portland. I'd had my airfare, I had my hotel booked. And the day before I was going to visit, Jan called me and told me Rob has COVID. You can still come to visit if you want and wear an N95 mask, but it's really up to you. And my heart sank. I so badly wanted to see Rob and Jan, but I knew that the day after I was going to see them, I was planning to meet my new baby nephew for the first time and see my father, who has a compromised immune system. And so I was torn. Did I visit Rob and Jan, risk getting COVID, and then potentially put my family at risk? Or just see Rob and Jan and then not meet my new nephew or spend time with family I hadn't been with together in 2 years? So I made the painful and grief-filled decision to not visit Rob and Jan. Rob's health quickly declined, and several weeks later, a year ago today, Rob died. And the strange thing is, friends, that memory and that grief, I had buried it deep at the bottom of that bag. And these tough, grief-filled decisions were everywhere during the pandemic. Who got ventilators? Who didn't? Who had access to vaccines first? Who didn't? Every decision weighed competing needs. When should churches reopen? Should there be masking or not? Singing or not? None of it was easy. The pandemic left many of us exhausted, overwhelmed, fried, crispy, burned out, just tired, fatigued. It left many of us questioning our jobs, our efficacy. Like, were we even making a difference in these jobs? It left us wondering, what kind of life did we really want to live? What life within us might emerge from this time? The pandemic was like a huge domino that toppled and set off a cascade of other changes and transitions in people's lives. It was true in my life as I reassessed my priorities, how I was spending my time, and even the kind of work I wanted to do. And in fact, one of the things that my wife, Juliana, and I are noticing in our practice as we accompany people through change and transition in their lives is that the pandemic is often an unnamed actor in their lives, but an actor with an outsized influence. It is shaping so much of the change they are experiencing now. The pandemic shook up our lives and our sense of self, tore apart our illusions of control, disrupted plans, left us feeling powerless, and for many of us was an illuminating time. It gave us increased clarity about what mattered and how we wanted to show up in the world. It's a lot. So let's just take a breath together. We can just take another breath, I think, together. And let me ask you, if this feels comfortable for you to do, what are you noticing in your body right now as I name these things? Maybe there's a tightness or a constriction. Maybe your body's resistant. Maybe there's overwhelm. Maybe there's some grief. Maybe you're angry or annoyed that I'm talking about this. You've already processed the pandemic. You're done with it, and that's fine. Enough with the pandemic already. You're like mentally putting out to me. Whatever it is you're feeling, all of that is okay. It's hard to articulate what exactly happened. It's hard to talk about it, isn't it? And that challenge is compounded by the story that whatever it was we went through, it is now over. The health emergency is over. The pandemic is over. We're back to normal. Everything is fine. But on some level, we sense that this isn't right. And maybe that's because we know or intuit or just have a haunting feeling that the pandemic may have, in fact, been a glimpse of the new normal. And by that, I mean a glimpse of multiple crises and system failures happening at once. And in that sense, a glimpse of what is to come. Climate catastrophe, coupled with political dysfunction, coupled with supply chain failure, coupled with physical infrastructure failing, coupled with rolling blackouts. The list can go on and on. More and more, the new normal may be a convergence of crises. If this is true, and the pandemic was a glimpse of this, then the task of metabolizing, processing, and making meaning of the pandemic and all that happened as best we can in order to be ready for the next wave of disruptions, then that takes on an added urgency. We must do this in order to maintain our resiliency, our humanity, our kindness, our responsiveness, our hope, and to not fall into paralyzing trauma or despair when the next crisis lands or may already be here. This may seem like an incredibly bleak assessment that I'm sharing with you. And right, we come to church for truth to be spoken, but also for little glimmers of hope, right? Like to feel some uplift and some hope. So this may feel really bleak. But I believe that the naming of this reality and talking about it in deeper ways than we have perhaps, it can free up what feels stuck in us And I believe that liberal faith communities have a role to play in this effort, because it has to be a community effort. This isn't something you can process on your own. We can't make meaning and claim insights and process it alone. We have to do it in community, in small groups, in worship spaces. We have to do it as institutions. And I know Unity is already doing much of this work in many ways and processing this pandemic experience. But I want to share with you this morning some ways I dream that this could look on a larger scale. Liberal faith communities could create regular ritual spaces to lament and grieve the losses we experienced and the losses we continue to experience. These spaces could also be a time to name and to claim whatever gifts or strange blessings emerged from the pandemic, because those are also there. Like that beautiful call to worship you heard from Jim as he sat in the candlelight with his beloved Nancy, not knowing what was next, but knowing that love held them. These spaces could be held specifically for caregivers or mental health providers, for parents, for those living with long COVID or with compromised immune systems. They could gather online, and for many others as a space to resettle our bodies, to create connection, and to reweave ourselves into community, understanding what happened at a deeper level. After those initial spaces of grieving and lamenting, we might move into spaces of group discernment, asking and listening for what now, and what's emerging, and how are we different and changed, and what does that mean? These are not easy questions to hold and attend to, with capitalism calling us back to the old patterns and ways of being, and with social media so often sapping our ability to maintain focus so that we can actually harvest the learnings from this time. But these discernment groups might lead us to reimagine what mutual aid could look like in the face of future crises and how we might respond differently next time. Another way to think about this is to regularly offer spaces where we hold the question, given all we've experienced, what is your deepest longing? What is your deepest longing for your life, for your family, for your community, for the country, for the earth? What is your deepest longing? Ask that question and dive into that space of imagining, of dreaming, of daring to name what you truly long for, and see where your longing leads you, and find the common threads of longing in community and weave that longing into being. Remember these opening lines from our reading. With many people claiming, publicly at least, that they're over the pandemic, that they have, so to speak, re-straightened all their picture frames and dragged their psychic trash to the curb, this article, and I would say this sermon, is saying, hey, hold up a second. What's in the bag? Friends, I know no one likes to open up a stinky bag of trash, me included. Like once that's there and you pull the zip tie thing, the tight plastic tight and wrap it up, you're not gonna open that back up. But what I think might be true is that in that stinky trash bag, there just might be treasure, gifts and learnings to be discovered amidst the pain and the sorrow and the junk. The force that gives us life is in that pain, is in that trash, and in those places we least expect it. May it be so, and amen.
This poem is Shoulders by Naomi Shihab Nye. A man crosses the street in rain, stepping gently, looking 2 times north and south because his son is asleep on his shoulder. No car must splash him, no car drive too near to his shadow. This man carries the world's most sensitive cargo, but he's not marked. Nowhere does his jacket say, fragile, handle with care. His ear fills up with breathing. He hears the hum of a boy's dream deep inside him. We are not going to be able to live in this world if we're not willing to do what he's doing with one another. The road will only be wide. The rain will never stop falling.
Stepping gently.
Your support of the church is an expression of the promises we make to each other and to the world. The contributions you make enable us to do the work we have pledged to do within our church community and out in the world. Each Sunday, the majority of our offering is passed on to community partners with whom we share a common cause. If you would like to nominate an organization to receive our Sunday offering, please complete the nomination form found on Unity's website. Today, the larger portion of our offering will be shared with Center for Victims of Torture, an organization working to forge new ways to advance human rights and build a future free from torture. Through research, training, and advocacy, Center for Victims of Torture works to promote healing for communities and individuals damaged by torture. This collection will support clients' needs of bus passes, clothing, and household items. Will the ushers please come forward? Please give as generously as you can today. We dedicate these offerings and ourselves to the greater work of the church, which is weaving a tapestry of love we call community. We hope today's service helps you to find and keep your balance. As we head into a new week, I'd like to share a few items to add to your calendar and to hold in your heart and mind. If you'd like to attend Finding Yourself at Unity, our weekly class for newcomers and inquirers, the conversation will take place today at 11:15 in the Gannett Room, which is upstairs on the second level. The topic this week is Membership 101, and we invite you to come explore the opportunities and commitments of membership at Unity Church and the many ways congregants connect with one another. We also hope you will stay for the Unity Singers recital today. Grab a cup of coffee in the parish hall, visit for a bit, and then join us back here in the sanctuary at noon to experience some of their incredible choral pieces from the past year. And finally, today marks the first day of the garage sale donation drop-off. We will be accepting items through Wednesday, July 26th, so we hope to see you this week with all your donation treasures. And then we look forward to welcoming you back for a volunteer shift and to shop the sale. All the details are in This Week at Unity. The insert is in your order of service. Now, please rise in body or spirit to sing our closing hymn.
I do have a closing blessing for you, but before I share that, I know in this congregation, like many of the congregations I served in Unitarian Universalism, there is a raging debate about applause or no applause. I get it. Sometimes I don't want any noise. I just want to take it in. And other times I can't help but wildly express my appreciation. So we're at the end of our service. We won't disrupt very much if we just acknowledge Ahmed and the Unity singers and what beautiful music they blessed us with. It was wonderful. Thank you. Thank you. I feel so personally blessed to be here and have them sing and support this music. So thank you, thank you, thank you. Friends, our ability to process and metabolize and make sense of what has happened to us during the pandemic, I think that depends on our ability to look into those bags of trash that we'd probably like to just throw away. So may you have courage and self-compassion as you do that work. And may you be blessed, and in turn, may you be a blessing. Amen.